Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that thrives on connection, yet at times we find ourselves in spaces of disconnection, spaces that can feel lonely, confusing, and even painful. And what happens when someone you care deeply about, someone you've shared moments with, starts to pull away? No calls, no texts, no conversations. And you begin to wonder, what if he's also doing no contact with me? When someone goes silent, the first instinct is often to react. We feel the need to fill the void with questions, assumptions, and often frantic attempts to understand why this has happened. It's natural to want answers when things feel uncertain or when our connection with someone begins to shift. However, in those moments, it's crucial to pause and reflect before taking any action. This pause isn't just about waiting, it's about creating space for self-awareness, clarity, and emotional intelligence to guide our responses. When we pause, we give ourselves the gift of reflection. Instead of immediately filling the silence with messages or calls, we create an opportunity to look inward and check in with ourselves. What am I truly feeling right now? Is it fear, frustration, sadness, or confusion? Am I projecting stories onto the situation based on past experiences, insecurities, or fears of abandonment? Often, our first reaction is to dive into what's happening externally, but the key is to first understand what is happening internally. Understanding your own emotional landscape allows you to better navigate what might come next without being driven by panic or assumptions. Reflection also allows us to separate our emotions from the situation itself. When we're in an emotional state, it's easy to let our feelings define the narrative. For example, if we feel hurt or ignored, we might convince ourselves that the other person doesn't care or that we've done something wrong. However, pausing gives us the chance to detach from these immediate emotional reactions and ask ourselves deeper questions. Could there be a reason beyond us for their silence? Could they be going through something personally, or are they simply needing space, not because of us, but because of their own inner process? By taking time to reflect, we can start to unravel these questions in a way that doesn't immediately jump to conclusions. The pause also allows us to challenge our assumptions. We often build stories in our heads that may or may not be true. For example, if a person who's always been communicative suddenly goes silent, it's easy to assume that it's a personal rejection. But in this moment of pause, we can ask ourselves, is this silence truly about me, or could it be about something else? Entirely, the pause creates an opportunity to challenge these assumptions. In doing so, we give ourselves the chance to gain perspective, rather than stay stuck in a narrative that might be far from the truth. Furthermore, reflection opens up a space for emotional regulation. It's easy to act impulsively when emotions are high. You might feel the urge to send a text or make a phone call immediately, hoping that somehow communication will resolve the discomfort. But those reactions often come from a place of needing reassurance rather than a place of clarity. By taking a step back, we can allow ourselves to calm down, regain control over our emotions, and act from a grounded, thoughtful place. This emotional regulation helps us avoid making decisions that could be driven by fear, anxiety, or neediness, which may not serve us in the long term. The act of pausing also allows us to reflect on our needs and boundaries. When faced with a situation of no contact, we may begin to question what we need in a relationship and how we want to be treated. In this moment of stillness, we can gain greater clarity on our personal boundaries. Are we comfortable with space, or do we need more consistent communication to feel safe and valued? Taking the time to pause helps us identify these needs clearly so that when we do decide to move forward, we do so with a sense of self-respect and understanding. It also gives us the ability to communicate our needs effectively when the time comes, rather than reacting impulsively and without clarity. In a world that often encourages fast responses and instant gratification, pausing and reflecting feels counterintuitive. Yet it is one of the most powerful things we can do when faced with uncertainty. It is in the stillness that we find our strength, our clarity, and our truth. When we take the time to pause and reflect, we not only better understand the situation at hand, but we also deepen our understanding of ourselves and our emotional needs. In turn, this self-awareness equips us with the tools to respond thoughtfully and deliberately rather than reacting out of fear or desperation. When faced with silence from someone we care about, the tendency is often to internalize the situation, blaming ourselves or questioning our worth. It's common to think, if they're not reaching out, then I must not be good enough. However, this harsh inner dialogue only adds to the emotional weight we're carrying. Instead, in these moments of uncertainty, it's essential to lean into self-compassion, being kind to yourself rather than critical. It's a practice that can transform the way you experience discomfort and uncertainty. Self-compassion is not about making excuses for yourself or ignoring the reality of the situation. It's about offering yourself the same kindness and understanding you would offer a close friend who's struggling. When we're in emotional pain, it's easy to believe that we are alone in our suffering or that we are somehow inadequate. But self-compassion invites us to remember that suffering is a part of the human experience and that our imperfections and vulnerabilities are not only acceptable, but part of what connects us to others. No one is immune to challenges in relationships, and it's important to remind ourselves that we are worthy of love and understanding, especially from ourselves. The first step in cultivating self-compassion is to recognize that you are not the problem. When someone withdraws, it can trigger feelings of shame or inadequacy. What did I do wrong, you might ask yourself. Why am I not enough? But these questions often come from a place of self-judgment, which is rooted in the belief that you are responsible for the other person's actions and choices. In truth, people's behaviors are complex and multifaceted. Silence might not have anything to do with your worth, but rather with their own circumstances, emotions, or needs. Recognizing that their actions are not a reflection of your value is crucial to reducing self-blame. Another critical aspect of self-compassion is the ability to acknowledge your emotions without judgment. It's natural to feel hurt, frustrated, or confused when someone you care about pulls away, but those emotions are valid. You don't need to judge yourself for feeling upset or vulnerable. Instead, give yourself permission to experience those emotions fully without trying to push them away or invalidate them. Self-compassion involves accepting that these feelings are part of who you are and that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. You are allowed to be human, to have moments of weakness, and to not have all the answers. In practicing self-compassion, it's also helpful to speak to yourself the way you would speak to a loved one. Imagine that a friend was going through the same situation. What would you say to them? Would you tell them they're not enough? Or would you offer reassurance and understanding? Most likely you would comfort them, reminding them of their strengths and the love they deserve. You tell them that they are worthy of respect, care, and kindness. This same approach should be extended to yourself. Be your own biggest supporter in times of pain. Instead of engaging in negative self-talk, practice positive, affirming language that reminds you of your inherent worth. Part of self-compassion also involves taking the time to care for your own needs. It's easy to get caught up in worrying about the other person's behavior, trying to figure out what's wrong or how to fix things. However, in doing so, you neglect your own well-being. Self-compassion is about recognizing that your needs matter too. In moments of uncertainty or emotional strain, ask yourself what would make you feel better, whether it's engaging in a comforting activity, reaching out to a trusted friend, or simply giving yourself some time and space to relax. Practicing self-care is an essential part of self-compassion. It shows that you value yourself and are willing to invest in your own happiness and well-being, even in difficult times. Moreover, practicing self-compassion involves letting go of the need for perfection. We often think that in order to be deserving of love or care, we must always be good enough or meet certain standards. But self-compassion teaches us that we don't need to be perfect to be worthy. We are worthy of care and compassion simply because we exist, not because we meet some arbitrary standard. This mindset can be liberating, allowing us to release the pressure we put on ourselves to be flawless, and instead embrace our flaws and imperfections as part of our authentic selves. When we lean into self-compassion, we create a more resilient and nurturing inner environment. Instead of spiraling into negative thoughts or feelings of unworthiness, we build emotional strength and cultivate a sense of peace, even in times of uncertainty. Self-compassion is a practice that allows us to weather emotional storms with grace, knowing that we are capable of handling our feelings with kindness, understanding, and care. It empowers us to face challenges, not from a place of self-doubt, but from a place of self-love and respect. When faced with silence, particularly from someone we care about, the instinct can be to focus all our energy on trying to fill the void, to seek answers, or to make sense of the absence. The silence, though, often holds an opportunity that many overlook, the chance to embrace the space. Rather than filling it with worry or anxiety, we can choose to see this gap as a time for personal growth, reflection, and reconnection with ourselves. Embracing the space doesn't mean ignoring the hurt or pretending that everything is okay. It's not about denying the discomfort that the silence might bring. It's about shifting our perspective. Rather than viewing the silence as something negative, as an indication of something wrong, we can start to see it as an opportunity to turn inward, to focus on ourselves in ways we might not have had the chance to do before. In relationships, we often get so caught up in the other person's actions, their words, their needs, that we forget to check in with our own. The silence offers a moment to refocus, to reconnect with who we are outside of this relationship dynamic. The first step in embracing the space is to acknowledge the need for it. Sometimes silence can be uncomfortable, but it is often necessary for both parties to gain clarity, space to process emotions, or simply the time to recharge. It's important to recognize that both you and the other person may need space, not because of any failure, but as a way to allow for individual growth. This space might give them the time to reflect on their own emotions, just as it allows you to reflect on yours. It doesn't necessarily mean the relationship is over or that the connection is broken. Instead, it may be a natural pause that allows both individuals to regroup and return with a clearer, fresher perspective. When we embrace the space, we also have the opportunity to rediscover ourselves. Often in relationships, we give so much of ourselves that we begin to lose sight of our own individuality. The silence provides a chance to reconnect with the parts of us that may have been sidelined: our passions, our hobbies, our dreams. How often do we truly give ourselves the time to explore these things without distractions or the needs of others pulling us in different directions? The absence of constant communication or engagement can feel daunting at first, but it is also a rare and precious opportunity to remember who we are beyond the relationship. Embracing this space allows us to reclaim that sense of self, to nurture the things that bring us joy, and to remind ourselves of the things that make us unique. Furthermore, embracing the space is a practice in patience. It's a reminder that not all things need to be solved immediately. In our fast-paced world, where responses and resolutions often come with the click of a button or the ping of a message, we can become accustomed to quick fixes. But not everything can be resolved with speed. Sometimes situations need time to unfold and people need time to process their feelings. Embracing this space teaches us to be patient with both ourselves and others, understanding that clarity doesn't always come in an instant. The answers may reveal themselves with time, and in the meantime, we can allow ourselves the grace of simply being with what is. The space also offers the possibility of deepening our understanding of what we truly need. In relationships, we often get caught up in what we expect from others, and when those expectations aren't met, we can feel disappointed or frustrated. But this pause invites us to turn the focus inward. What do we need in this moment? What are our non-negotiables, and what are we willing to be flexible about? The silence encourages us to ask ourselves these questions, giving us the chance to redefine what we truly value in our relationships and in ourselves. This clarity can be empowering as it equips us to make decisions that are aligned with our authentic needs and desires. In embracing the space, we also allow for growth both individually and relationally. For some, the silence might be temporary, a brief period of distance that eventually brings them closer to the people in their lives. For others, it may mark a turning point in the relationship where the space serves as a catalyst for change or evolution. Either way, this space isn't wasted. It's a fertile ground where both parties can grow, heal, and shift in ways that they may not have been able to do if they were constantly engaged with one another. Sometimes we need the distance to gain perspective, to reassess what truly matters, and to make space for the new things that are waiting to emerge. Choosing to embrace the space is an act of self-respect and self-awareness. It's a commitment to understanding that we don't need constant external validation to be whole, and that our sense of peace and fulfillment can come from within. Instead of running from the discomfort of silence, we learn to sit with it, to allow it to serve us. In doing so, we invite growth, clarity, and a deeper sense of connection, not just with others, but with ourselves. When someone pulls away or the dynamics of a relationship shift, it often brings the question of boundaries to the forefront. Boundaries are a crucial aspect of any healthy relationship, whether it's with a partner, a friend, or a colleague. Yet they are often one of the most overlooked or misunderstood concepts. Boundaries are not walls, they are the lines we draw to protect our emotional well-being and ensure that we are treated with respect, kindness, and care. When faced with silence or withdrawal from someone we care about, it becomes even more important to establish and maintain boundaries that honor our own emotional needs. Setting healthy boundaries in moments of silence or distance begins with a deep understanding of ourselves. What are the things that make us feel safe, valued, and respected? What are the behaviors or patterns that leave us feeling drained, disrespected, or emotionally hurt? Boundaries aren't about controlling others or forcing them to behave a certain way. They are about understanding what we need in order to protect our own emotional health. By identifying these needs, we empower ourselves to communicate clearly with others, creating a framework for how we wish to be treated in any given situation. When we talk about boundaries, it's essential to recognize that they are not rigid. They are flexible and can evolve over time. In any relationship, circumstances change and people grow. As such, boundaries need to be adaptable. For example, you might have been comfortable with a certain level of communication in the past, but now you find that you need more space or less contact to feel emotionally balanced. This shift is natural. It's important to be aware of how your needs change and to communicate those changes with others as clearly and honestly as possible. Healthy boundaries are dynamic and should be adjusted as needed to reflect our current emotional state and desires. A critical aspect of setting healthy boundaries is learning how to say no. Saying no can feel uncomfortable, especially when we're afraid of disappointing others or when we fear that saying no will lead to rejection or conflict. But when we fail to establish boundaries, we risk compromising our own emotional health and allowing others to take more from us than we are able or willing to give. No is not a rejection of the person, it's a clear and respectful statement of our own needs. It's a way to preserve our own energy, time, and emotions. Saying no is a tool that allows us to maintain our personal space and emotional balance, ensuring that we're not overextending ourselves or becoming resentful. Another important aspect of boundaries is the need for consistency. It's not enough to set a boundary once and then assume that it will always be respected. Boundaries require ongoing communication and reinforcement. When someone crosses a boundary, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it's important to address it directly and calmly. This doesn't mean confrontation or creating conflict. It means standing firm in your own truth and reminding the other person of your needs. Boundaries are about self-respect, and when they are violated, it's an opportunity to reaffirm them, not to retreat into silence or frustration. Consistency in enforcing boundaries builds trust and teaches others how to treat us with respect. Boundaries also help us avoid falling into patterns of codependency. In relationships where one person consistently withdraws or withholds, there can be a tendency to overfunction where one person gives too much or sacrifices their own needs in order to please the other. This dynamic can be exhausting and damaging over time. Setting boundaries helps prevent this by ensuring that both parties are responsible for their own emotional well-being. Each person should be able to stand on their own emotionally without relying on the other for validation or support. By setting clear boundaries, we reinforce the idea that we are not responsible for managing the other person's emotions, nor should we expect them to manage ours. An important part of boundary setting is understanding that it's okay to change your mind. Just because you set a boundary in the past doesn't mean it has to remain fixed forever. As we grow and evolve, so too do our needs. If a boundary that once felt comfortable no longer serves you, it's okay to adjust it. This is a natural part of self-awareness and growth. It's essential to give yourself permission to reevaluate your boundaries and make changes as needed. This flexibility allows us to honor our evolving emotional needs while still respecting the needs of others. When we set healthy boundaries, we are not only protecting ourselves, but also creating an environment where mutual respect can thrive. By clearly communicating our needs and limits, we allow space for others to do the same. Healthy boundaries lead to healthier, more balanced relationships where both individuals feel seen, valued, and respected. The key is not to view boundaries as walls that separate us, but as a framework for connection that ensures both parties are emotionally safe, respected, and able to thrive. Letting go of expectations can be one of the most difficult, yet freeing practices in any relationship. Often we enter relationships with certain hopes, dreams, or ideals about how things will unfold. We imagine the perfect scenarios, the way we want others to behave, or the kind of connection we want to have. These expectations can be based on previous experiences, cultural norms, or even fantasies about how things should be. However, when those expectations go unmet, it can lead to disappointment, frustration, and sometimes even heartbreak. Letting go of these expectations doesn't mean lowering standards or resigning to unhealthy situations. It's about accepting people as they are and embracing the fluidity of relationships as they evolve. The first step in letting go of expectations is recognizing that we cannot control the behavior of others. We often place undue pressure on ourselves, believing that we have the power to influence or change how others act or how they feel about us. But the reality is that we cannot control the actions, thoughts, or feelings of anyone else, no matter how much we might want to. By accepting this truth, we release ourselves from the burden of trying to mold or manipulate others into fitting into a predetermined box. We free ourselves from the mental energy spent on worrying about how someone will respond or how a situation will play out. Instead of trying to dictate the future, we learn to flow with the present. Expectations often arise from our own unmet needs or desires, and when those expectations are not fulfilled, it's easy to feel rejected, misunderstood, or abandoned. Yet, it's important to recognize that unmet expectations are not necessarily a reflection of a lack of care or intention on the part of others. Sometimes people simply cannot meet our expectations because they are on their own journey, dealing with their own challenges, emotions, and limitations. By understanding that their actions are not personal rejections of us, we create space for compassion and empathy, both for them and for ourselves. When we let go of rigid expectations, we open ourselves up to a more authentic connection with others. Relationships are complex, dynamic, and ever-changing. No one person can fit all of our needs all the time. Sometimes we expect one person to provide us with emotional support, companionship, affection, and understanding, all in one go. But by letting go of this expectation, we allow room for people to show up in their own unique ways. Some people may be better at offering emotional support, while others may excel in providing companionship. By releasing the expectation that they must be everything, we give them the freedom to show up as they are without the pressure of fulfilling every role. Additionally, letting go of expectations helps us stop living in a state of constant disappointment. When we expect someone to behave a certain way or to meet our needs in a specific manner, and they inevitably fail to do so, it can lead to bitterness or resentment. We become fixated on how things should have been instead of accepting things as they are. This mindset can be emotionally exhausting and prevent us from enjoying the present moment. When we release the hold that expectations have on us, we allow ourselves to be more present, to appreciate what is, and to find joy in the spontaneous moments that arise in a relationship. Another significant aspect of letting go of expectations is the freedom it gives us to be more flexible. Life is full of surprises, and often things unfold in ways that we couldn't have predicted. If we are too attached to a specific outcome or a certain way of doing things, we may miss out on the opportunities and growth that come from embracing the unexpected. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean giving up on what we want. It means being open to different paths to get there. It allows us to be adaptable and to trust that even if things don't go according to plan, they may still lead to a valuable and meaningful outcome. When we release expectations, we also create the space for deeper self-awareness. Often our expectations are projections of our own desires or insecurities. We expect others to act a certain way because we feel that we need validation, reassurance, or affirmation. By letting go of these expectations, we are forced to confront our own feelings of inadequacy or fear. It becomes a call to turn inward and recognize that our sense of worth doesn't depend on the actions or approval of others. We can start to embrace the idea that we are enough as we are, regardless of whether others meet our predefined expectations. Letting go of expectations also allows for healthier, more balanced relationships. When we stop holding others to impossible standards or expecting them to meet every need we have, we allow for more genuine, unconditional connections to form. People are free to be themselves, and we are free to accept them for who they truly are, not who we think they should be. This creates space for mutual respect, understanding, and love. It shifts the focus from trying to change or control others to appreciating them in their full humanity, flaws and all. At its core, letting go of expectations is about embracing the present moment with openness and acceptance. It is about recognizing that while we may have hopes for the future, the only thing we can truly control is our response to the present. By letting go of expectations, we release the mental and emotional strain of trying to predict or force outcomes. Instead, we allow ourselves to experience the richness of what is unfolding without the burden of trying to fit it into a preconceived mold. When navigating the complexities of relationships, especially those where there is distance or silence, it's easy to fall into the trap of overthinking. Overanalyzing situations, wondering what went wrong, or trying to figure out the reasons behind someone's behavior often takes up a significant amount of mental and emotional energy. While it's natural to seek answers and try to make sense of things, Constantly overthinking can lead us to places of anxiety, confusion, and sometimes unnecessary suffering. The key to finding peace in such situations is to embrace a shift in perspective, a change in how we respond to the unknown and to the silence. One of the most powerful ways to free ourselves from the grip of overthinking is to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness invites us to focus on the present moment rather than getting lost in the spiral of what ifs or why isn't they. Instead of fixating on past events or imagining future scenarios, mindfulness teaches us to simply observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment. When we become aware of the tendency to overthink, we can gently redirect our attention back to the here and now, focusing on what is within our control rather than the things outside of us. By staying anchored in the present, we reduce the mental chatter that feeds anxiety and allows us to regain a sense of calm. Part of mindfulness involves learning to accept uncertainty. Relationships, like life itself, are unpredictable, and trying to control or predict every outcome only adds to our stress. When we let go of the need for certainty, we free ourselves from the need to constantly dissect and analyze every interaction or moment of silence. Instead of thinking we need all the answers right away, we can learn to sit with the uncertainty, trusting that the answers will come in their own time. Accepting uncertainty allows us to relax into the ebb and flow of life, understanding that not everything needs to be figured out immediately or perfectly. Another way to move beyond overthinking is by shifting our focus from seeking validation or closure from others to nurturing our own inner sense of worth. Overthinking often stems from a place of insecurity or a need for reassurance. We might wonder, am I good enough? Did I say something wrong? Why are they not reaching out to me? These thoughts create a cycle of self-doubt and vulnerability. But when we place our sense of self-worth in external validation, whether it comes from a partner, friend, or anyone else, we are setting ourselves up for emotional instability. Our value should not depend on how others behave, but on how we view ourselves. By strengthening our sense of self, we can break free from the constant need for external reassurance. This practice helps us stop overthinking and begin trusting ourselves, knowing that we are enough regardless of the actions of others. Letting go of overthinking also involves learning how to reframe situations. Instead of immediately jumping to conclusions or assuming the worst, we can choose to see things from a different angle. For example, if someone is distant or silent, instead of assuming it's a reflection of their feelings toward us, we can ask ourselves if they may be going through something personal that has nothing to do with us. It's easy to take silence personally, but by reframing the situation, we can see that the other person's behavior is likely more about them than about us. This shift in perspective helps prevent unnecessary self-blame and creates emotional space to stay centered rather than caught in a cycle of assumptions. It's also important to recognize that we don't need to have all the answers right now. Sometimes the desire to understand everything at once is driven by our fear of the unknown. We feel a sense of discomfort when things are unclear, so we attempt to fill the void with explanations. But this urgency to solve problems quickly often leads to more confusion and stress. Accepting that it's okay to not have all the answers immediately allows us to stop forcing solutions. We can give ourselves permission to pause, to not know, and to allow the situation to unfold at its own pace. This release of control creates a space for peace as we stop pressuring ourselves to have everything figured out. Another strategy to prevent overthinking is to focus on self-care. When we become overly fixated on a situation or another person's actions, we can lose sight of our own needs. Engaging in activities that nourish our mind, body, and spirit can help break the cycle of overthinking. Exercise, creative hobbies, meditation, or simply spending time in nature can help us reset, giving our brains a break from the constant mental chatter. When we prioritize self-care, we shift our focus back to ourselves and what we need to feel grounded, peaceful, and strong. Taking care of our emotional and physical well-being helps us build resilience, making it easier to weather moments of uncertainty or distance in relationships without succumbing to overthinking. Additionally, it's helpful to challenge the assumptions that fuel overthinking. Often, we believe that overanalyzing the situation will lead to clarity, but more often than not, it only deepens confusion. Instead of assuming that overthinking is the path to understanding, we can ask ourselves if we are really gaining anything from it. Are we finding clarity, or are we just going in circles? By challenging our assumptions, we can break the cycle of overthinking and create space for a more balanced, peaceful mindset. The goal in letting go of overthinking is to shift from a place of constant worry and doubt to a place of acceptance and trust. Trust that, even without all the answers, we are capable of navigating our emotions and relationships with strength. Trust that silence or distance is not a reflection of our worth and that we are fully capable of thriving, regardless of what others do. By embracing this mindset, we stop the cycle of overthinking and create the mental and emotional freedom to live in the present moment. In relationships, especially when faced with silence or distance, it's crucial to shift our mindset from overthinking and anxiety to acceptance and self-awareness. By embracing the space, setting healthy boundaries, letting go of unrealistic expectations, and practicing mindfulness, we empower ourselves to navigate the unknown with grace. The real transformation comes from understanding that we cannot control others, but we can control how we respond to situations. Through self-care, reframing our perspectives, and trusting ourselves, we release the mental clutter that prevents us from living fully. Ultimately, it's about finding peace within, allowing ourselves the freedom to grow, and accepting that the only thing we can truly control is our own response.